welcome back to the Acid Trash Jamboree, and to another instalment of the Cassette Curiosities mini-series. Yeah, seeing as I'm still digging out and re-listening to tapes that I haven't heard in years, I figured I'd dedicate another few minutes to sharing my thoughts on a bunch more, again, all of which are part of that amazing, post-James Ferraro explosion of underground activity circa the late noughties and early 2010s. Okay, so we kick this latest instalment off with Pillars at Night by Quiet Evenings, the husband and wife duo of Grant and Rachel Evans, yet more key players in this whole global cassette scene. Now, the Evanses are perhaps best known for their solo endeavours as Nova Scotian Arms and Motion Sickness of Time Travel, respectively, and for co-running labels like Hooker Vision and Adversary, though as you might expect, they have a bunch of collaborative projects on the go too, this one being the most prolific. And yeah, Quiet Evenings certainly live up to their name, Pillars at Night, presenting us with 3 relaxed, low-volume electronic meditations, which are perfect for post-sundown listening, just so long as you don't mind things getting a touch dark and spooky along the way. Yeah, the A-side is dominated by moody, brooding synthesizers, opener Pillar of Glass being ripe with shadowy, droning dread, whilst the 12-minute Pillar of Insects gives us something altogether more melancholic and contemplative, the duo's wowing, phased-out stargazer music, very much in the same galaxy as space ambient legend Michael Stearns' Planetary Unfolding, backed up by the rhythmic chirping of crickets. Then the B-side's lone piece, Pillar of Smoke, introduces a delicate, rippling guitar loop to the mix, which ends up being subsumed by a cluster of bleak, grey, industrialised tones that flicker and pulse for nearly a quarter of an hour, getting more and more menacing by the minute. Next up, here's another Quiet Evenings tape entitled Intrepid Trips, which the pair self-released in 2011, a vinyl edition following a few months later on Hooker Vision. And yeah, this is another low-key, synth-based affair, though the feeling of darkness is replaced here by something altogether more uncanny and strange, at least on the A-side, with the harmonious and blissful chordal work shadowed by sour and discordant sonorities, which never become overbearing, though they're present just enough to unsettle at the very least. As I mentioned in the last video, when I embarked on my belated cassette odyssey back in the early 2010s, I had a craving for new age or ambient music with a weird, almost alien feeling, and yeah, this piece definitely fits the bill. The B-side is altogether more traditionally serene, much more along the lines of what I was expecting from Quiet Evenings before I heard them. The warm glow of the synths, at first backed by strange echoey sounds, like objects slapping against a wooden floor, before the duo kick into maximum new age mode, floating us up to the ceiling on exquisite, heavenly drones. So, very cool stuff from these two. Yeah, you're pretty much always guaranteed quality where the Evanses are concerned. Moving on to a couple more efforts by Josh Burke, who I also covered in the last tape review I did, starting with VR4 2C1, credited to 56k. Now, to date, Burke has managed to crank out almost 30 releases under this alias, though as far as I'm aware, I only have 2 of them, so I can't say for sure if there's a predominant 56k sound that separates it from all his other aliases. Going off this one at least, I'm guessing not, as yeah, it plays out a heck of a lot like a bunch of other stuff I've heard from him. Granted, Calls in the Night gets things underway resembling some lo-fi 80s horror or sci-fi movie theme. After this though, it's business as usual, with pieces like The Monitor and Create twinkling away nicely, the remainder sounding like the music you'd hear playing in some dystopian aquarium. All long, slow, free-floating synth chords, again with that ever-present sense of the uncanny. This one, entitled Envision, and credited simply to Josh Burke, mixes things up a bit more, cramming multiple untitled miniatures into 30 minutes, ranging from straight-ahead new age prettiness, mysterious lo-fi ambience, and shimmering cosmetia minimalism, to much colder and more sinister avant-garde atonality. Yeah, not too much else to say here. It's cool stuff for sure, but with the discography as vast and sprawling as Burke's, it's extremely hard to gauge if it's truly one of his finest, or if it's just a drop in the veritable ocean of music that he's done over the past couple of decades. Sure enough, if you already like what he does, then I can recommend it, but even if you can't find this particular tape, I can almost guarantee that whatever else you stumble across will at some point cover the same territory as Envision, and will probably be just as enjoyable. Okay, so I talked about a bunch of White Prism releases in the last tape review I did, which was the duo of Josh Burke and this fella, Ben Billington, who also records using the alias Quicksails. And yeah, this tape, By Watercolours, is the only thing I have by the project. In fact, I think I got it as a freebie when I was buying up the White Prisms all those years ago. Revisiting it for the first time in ages was basically like listening to a new album, as I'd forgotten everything about it. But yeah, it's very cool. Billington sounding very much influenced by that curious late 70s, early 80s period of electronic music, where post-Kraftwerk, artists were shortening their tracks considerably and introducing catchy melodies with commercial potential, as well as factoring in influence from the burgeoning industrial and post-punk scenes. So yeah, with opener Keep the Bounce, I'm reminded very much of said band circa the Man Machine, as well as the synth pop of early Asmus Tietjens and the playful whimsy of Rodelius. To follow, we get the more improvised sounding avant-gardisms of Different Draws, and the lilting waltz following The Crew, the side closing out with In Prytania, which features nods to the kinds of driving, militaristic rhythms that people like Konrad Schnitzler favoured, Billington's snare cracking away alongside buzzing electronics and disembodied voices. Side B then starts on a more ambient note with the piece Stay Afloat, which is a lovely freeform melange of soft pads and tinkling xylophones, whilst Porch Swing Comfort pits staccato synth patterns against some deft jazz drumming. After all this, ascending the river walls brings the curtain down in fine fashion, with slow and sad-sounding sequencer lines, and rippling, watery piano arpeggios gradually melting away into multi-layered chaos, sounding like a bunch of your fave Sky Records LPs playing simultaneously. Indeed, if you like the classic period of that label, then you'll no doubt find much to enjoy here. And yeah, after playing through By Watercolours a couple of times for this review, it's got me intrigued as to what else Billington has cranked out since then. Next, we have a collaborative effort, Bamboo Airships by Black Eagle Child and the Goodwillies. Black Eagle Child being the solo project of Michael Jantz, who I have quite a lot of stuff by, whilst the Goodwillies are a family band who I know very little about. Yeah, despite being another of the very earliest tapes that I picked up when I started my odyssey into this scene, this remains the only thing that I own with them on, so I've no idea if Bamboo Airships is particularly representative of their usual sound or if it's some kind of departure. Black Eagle Child, on the other hand, I'm much more familiar with. Jantz probably being best known for his loop-heavy electric guitar work, which, no doubt partially thanks to the influence of Emerald's guitarist Mark Maguire, was one of the hallmarks of this whole scene. Indeed, the A-side begins in a low-key, melancholic fashion, with emotive, filmic clean guitar figures, reminding me of post-rock bands like Mono, backed by organ swells and subtle, buzzing drones, the minor key weepiness occasionally offset by sour notes and weird electronic squiggles. Eventually, the layered guitars drop out and the organ comes to the fore for an intense, Krauty jam, supported by unpredictable drum machine rhythms, which get more fuzzy and blown out by the minute. Unfortunately though, at this point my copy went all warbly and stopped playing, so I've no idea how the piece ends, but it was nice while it lasted. Yeah, as I touched on last time when I was talking about the Body Morph tape on the same label, unfortunately it's hit and miss these days, where the tapes from this era will still play all the way through. I don't know if the tape duplication factory that these imprints used back then was cutting corners and occasionally dubbing onto inferior quality tape, or if I've just had these things sitting in storage for too long. But yeah, my heart always sinks when I hear the music start to warp and warble. That said, with some perseverance, thankfully I got things back up and running enough to hear the flip side, which starts life with more blown out rhythm box shenanigans under a ton of wild electric guitar atonality, echoed flute, and huge bass pulses, which almost take things in a psychedelic dub direction. After a while, this segues into another echoey guitar jam, this time in the style of the old masters like Manuel Gutsching, Gunter Schickert, and Achim Reichel, which gets ever more layered and complex before the drum machine re-enters the fray and things blossom into some prime Neu worship for the remainder. We finish with a quick word about this ridiculously long and sprawling tape, Vidicon System by Uneven Universe. And yeah, this was yet another project of Daniel Dlugosielski, of Body Morph infamy, this time in a duo with Holly Young, also known as Hellfire Holly. Much like Leeches, the project Dlugosielski shared with Andrew Coltrane, Uneven Universe was another improvised saxes and electronics affair, though thankfully this 90-minute monster is more varied and way more entertaining than the Leeches tape I discussed last time. Yeah, whilst that one starts off cool, for me it loses steam a bit on the B-side, spending too long meandering about in a sleepy, narcotic haze. Granted, Vidicon System does have its fair share of long, slow passages of soporific blowing, though they're broken up by much more energised and noisy pieces, some of which are so drenched in effects that you can barely make out any sax beneath the audio mangling. Most of the pieces were recorded live, it would seem, though according to the notes on Discogs at least, we get a clutch of more intimate studio works too, the sound being nicely saturated and lo-fi throughout. As I said, clocking in at an hour and a half, this is an extremely long tape, so for me anyways, I found it most effective listened to in a couple of sittings. Otherwise, yeah, this is another worthy entry in the sprawling Excite Bike catalogue. Okay, so that's it for another roundup of cool underground tapes. For even more, please check out the archive. Thanks as ever for watching, and I'll catch you again soon on the Acid Trash Jamboree.